Good evening, fourth graders, and welcome to another flipped lesson. Tonight's flipped lesson is going to be all about fractions. So let's quickly go back and review something that we've learned tons and tons of times already. What are fractions? Fractions are part of a whole. So it represents just a piece of a whole number. Take a moment right now and write that down in your vocabulary section. Okay, so if fractions are part of a whole number, or part of a larger piece, think of a time when you might use fractions in the real world. I want you to write that down in your global section. This is going to start having you think more about why we learn about fractions to begin with. Once we think that it happens in the real world, we have more of an understanding in math. So take a moment right now, you can pause the video, and write that down in your global section. So just to recap, you should have the definition of a fraction in the vocabulary section of your notebook, and you should have the real life or real world scenario when you would use fractions or when you have used fractions in the past in your global section. Now let's look at some more vocabulary terms that you're going to hear as fourth graders. So we've learned in the past that a number, or the number on the top of a fraction line, is the numerator. I always think number on top, numerator. That's just one way that it helps me to remember those terms. And since the numerator is the number on the top, that's going to talk about just a section of the whole, okay? So that is how many sections we're looking at, whether they're how many shaded sections there are, or how many colored sections, or how many not shaded sections there are. The number on top just talks about how many sections. After you've written down the numerator, please write down the denominator. And the denominator is the number that's down below the fraction line. And that is the total number of parts. So in this fraction, 1 out of 4, or 1/4, one piece is either shaded or one piece is counted out of a total number of 4 pieces altogether. So the number on the bottom, the denominator, is talking about how many pieces that whole thing is broken up into. Now let's look at these two examples. These are the types of fractions that we have been most used to. We've seen a bar, the bar's been broken up into certain pieces, and we either counted how many pieces were colored, or how many pieces were left uncolored. So just looking at the first example, and we remember that the number on top, or the numerator, is the number of pieces being counted, I'm going to say let's find the fraction of this bar that is colored. So I'm going to put that down here. So I want to find the fraction of colored pieces. And the fraction that is colored here would be 1, 2, 3. That's the number of pieces colored. Then I'm going to put my fraction line. And sometimes you'll see a diagonal fraction line, or you'll see a horizontal fraction line. But either way, the first number, either the number to the left of the fraction line or the number on top, is going to tell you how many pieces we counted, and then the number to the right of the diagonal line, or below, the denominator, is going to tell us how many pieces that whole thing was broken up into. So in this case, the whole thing was broken up into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces. So I'm going to write that number down below in my denominator. So we've figured out that this whole shape was broken up into 5 pieces, and 3 of those pieces are colored. Now let's see the fraction that is not colored. So when I'm looking at the section that's not colored, I'm only going to count the pieces that don't have any shading. So in this case, I only see 2 pieces that don't have any shading. So that's going to be my numerator. And we counted the total number of pieces already, and there were 5 pieces altogether. So that whole thing was broken up into 5 pieces. So my denominator stayed the same because I was looking at the same shape. So looking at example 1, I could say 3/5 of that bar is shaded, or I could say 2/5 of that bar is not shaded. Let's take a look at example number 2. So if we're thinking the same way, we're looking at that whole shape, I'm going to talk about what the fraction is of colored pieces and what the fraction is of not colored pieces. Again, when I'm looking for colored, I count the colored pieces. And there are 1, 2 colored pieces, so that's my numerator. And then my denominator talks about how many pieces altogether. So I see 1, 2, 3 in all. So 2/3, or 2 out of 3 of these pieces are colored. When I'm trying to find the not colored fraction, I count the number of pieces that aren't colored. And that's just 1 in this case, because only 1 piece out of this bar is not colored. So 1 is going to be my numerator. And again, since we're looking at the same shape as up here, the same bar, we know that that bar, that 1 whole bar, was broken up into 3 pieces. So looking at example number 2, 2/3 of this bar is colored, and 1/3 of this bar is not colored. That's what we've been used to. We've looked at different shapes, and we found the fraction of the shape. Now let's take a look at something a little different. So we were used to that. This is a whole different story. And when we're looking at finding the fraction of a number, we have to follow a certain process, similar to a process that we might have followed for multiplying by a 2-digit number, or a process like, does McDonald's sell burgers? And we had to follow that process in order to get the correct answer. So there isn't a special name for this process, but I think if you follow it exactly the way I'm showing you in these examples, your practice problems will be just fine. Not a problem at all. So the first thing that I do when I'm trying to find the fraction of a number is I look at the whole number in my question. And in this case, what is 2/3 of 12? My whole number is 12, because I don't see a fraction bar or a fraction line, and I know that 12 is a whole number because I could have 12 of something. So 12 is my whole number, and I have to remember that. So I circle it to have myself say, that's the whole number, that's the whole number, that's the whole number. So that was my first step, locate the whole number. The next step is to see what your denominator is. And I like to underline my denominator, especially when I'm finding the fraction of a number. The whole number and the denominator are going to play a really big role in this process. So we have 12 as our whole number and 3 as our denominator. And I like to create a picture when I'm trying to solve what the fraction of a number is. And 3, my denominator, is going to be how many circles I draw. So I'm going to draw it down below in my work area, 3 circles. Because that's how many I had. That's the number in my denominator. So now I used what I underlined here. Now it's time to see how many times 3 goes into 12. If you know your fast facts, you're going to know that 3 times 4 equals 12, or 3 goes into 12 4 times. Now, knowing that 3 goes into 12 4 times, you're going to know that if you have 3 groups, you're going to have 4 in each group, because your whole number, the whole number that we're talking about, is 12. So if I have 3 groups with 4 in it, that gives me 12. So far, I found what my whole number was. I looked and I underlined my denominator. I created the number of circles that was in my denominator. So there was a 3, I created 3 circles. And the next step was to ask myself, how many times does my denominator go into my whole number? And then I got 4. I put 4 into each circle because there were 4. 3 went into 12 4 times. So that was 3 steps. The last step in finding a fraction of a number is this piece right here, my numerator. My numerator is going to tell me how many circles to count, or how many pieces to count. So in this case, I have 2 in my numerator. So I'm going to circle 2 pieces right now. That's going to tell me that whatever is in these 2 pieces, because that's how many pieces I'm counting. Remember, that numerator talks about how many pieces to count. That's going to tell me what my fraction of a number is. So if I count how many tallies are in this big circle, because it's 2 of them are circled, I'm going to get 8. So in these 2, 4 plus 4, that gives me 8. So to answer this question, what is 2/3 of 12? The answer is 8. So 2/3 of 12 is 8. Let's take a look at the second example. This time I'll go a little bit slower so that it makes the most sense to you. First step, locate your whole number. 15. Second step, identify the denominator. 5. 5 in my denominator is how many circles I'm going to draw. 5 circles. Then the next step is to ask, how many times does my number in the denominator go into my whole number? 5 goes into 15, since I know my fast facts. It goes in 3 times. 3 is the number I'm going to put in each circle. All that really says is 5 groups of 3 is equal to 15. And you agree with that, right? Those are fast facts. The last step is to identify the numerator and count how many pieces are in one of those 5 circles. We only have 1 circled, and now I'm going to count 1, 2, 3 tallies. So to answer this question, 1/5 of 15 is equal to 1, 2, 3, because there are 3 tallies in that 1 circle. I think you're ready to try some on your own. These practice problems will be easy as long as you follow those steps that I did in our examples. So the first question, what is 1/3 of 27? Remember, identify your whole number, identify your denominator, draw that many circles, ask yourself how many times does 3 go into 27, put that number of tallies in each circle, and then locate your numerator and count how many is in that. That will give you your fraction of a number. I hope you have fun. Remember, you can always go back and rewind. You can always pause at any time. And I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.